During the late 1980s, Hawaii became the host of the NFL Pro Bowl, endured the storms of Hurricane Eva, and reached a population of 1 million residents. But perhaps overshadowing all of that is the fact that during this time period, Hawaii had its second serial killer, who was even more prominent and deadly than its first. While it's been almost 4 decades since he first struck, the case of the Honolulu Strangler remains unsolved. On May 29, 1985, Vicky Purdy headed out to go clubbing with her friends in the Waikiki district of Honolulu. Aged just 25, Vicky worked at an adult video rental store and was married to an Army helicopter pilot named Gary. The couple had been together since Vicky was 20 and had moved to Hawaii less than 18 months before her demise. Vicky was last seen alive at around midnight when she was dropped off at the Shorebird Hotel by a taxi so that she could pick up her vehicle from the hotel's parking lot. When she didn't return home, her husband, Gary, attempted to contact her through a telephone paging system, but his requests for communication went unanswered. Driving around searching for her, Gary came across his wife's car, still in the Shorebird's car park, but there was no sign of Vicky. The following morning, however, Gary's worst fears were confirmed. Vicky's body was discovered on an embankment overlooking Ke'ehi Lagoon near Lagoon Drive. While she still sported the yellow jumpsuit she'd left the house in on the evening of the 29th, Vicky's underwear was missing. Her hands had been tied behind her back, and she had been sexually assaulted. Her cause of death was determined to be strangulation via ligature. Notably, Gary told the Honolulu Star-Bulletin that his wife was, quote, a very strong person and not somebody to be messed with, stating that early in their marriage when problems arose, she, quote, knocked the shit out of me. He also described the 25-year-old as streetwise, saying that she knew who not to trust. It made Vicky's assault all the more surprising and led to some speculation that more than one person was involved in the attack, with Gary himself suggesting it would take at least 2 people given her physical strength and determination. Another interesting piece of information is that 2 women were stabbed to death at Vicky's place of work just 1 year before her own death, and it was initially theorized that perhaps these crimes were linked. For more than 6 months following Vicky's death, the Honolulu Strangler, as he would soon come to be known, lay low. He didn't strike again until January 14th, 1986. Regina Sakamoto, a Kansas-born teenager, was last heard from at 7:15 on the morning of the 14th. Described as shy but friendly, the 17-year-old was known to be very close with her mother and was actively involved in school activities. Her brother, Omar, described her as buckish, fun-loving, and everyone's friend. She planned to attend Hawaii Pacific University after the summer. Having missed her bus to school on the morning of January 14th, Regina called her boyfriend and informed him that she would be late. Witnesses saw her a short time afterwards waiting for the next bus, but the 17-year-old never made it to school. The following morning, Regina's body was discovered at Ke'ehi Lagoon. She was nude from the waist down. Her hands had been bound behind her back with a parachute cord. Like Vicky, she had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death, although unlike Vicky, Regina had been left partially undressed, and one foot was tied to a rock with an electrical cord. Still, the similarities between the 2 cases were striking, so much so that the police quickly concluded that Regina and Vicky had fallen victim to the same predator. The authorities were dealing with a serial killer. The Strangler's 3rd victim was a young, married churchgoer named Denise Hughes, described by her supervisor as a woman who always had a smile on her face. The 21-year-old failed to show up for her secretarial shift on January 30th, 1986, just 2 weeks after Regina's demise. The wife of a Navy serviceman, Denise's husband was stationed aboard a ship at Pearl Harbor, meaning he was unaware of her disappearance at the time. Notably, the 21-year-old traveled to work via bus, just like Regina. On February 1st, 2 days after she was reported missing, her body was discovered. She was found by fishermen, wrapped in a section of blue tarpaulin in the Mauna stream, which flows into the Ke'ehi Lagoon. She was still wearing her blue dress. Like the other Strangler victims, Denise had been strangled and her hands tied with a parachute cord. She remained unidentified for a few days until her dental records were sent to the mainland US and a match was confirmed. There are mixed reports about whether or not Denise was sexually assaulted. Some articles state that an autopsy couldn't conclusively determine whether or not she was, but that authorities thought it was likely, given the similarities in her case to those of Regina and Vicky. On February 5th, 1986, just a few days after Denise's body was recovered, the Honolulu Police Department established a 27-person task force which aimed to identify and apprehend the serial killer now known as the Honolulu Strangler. The detectives who formed the group included experienced veterans from both the sex crime and homicide departments. The HPD also recruited the help of both the FBI and the Green River Task Force, which had been given the assignment of apprehending famed serial killer Gary Ridgway, who had become a suspect in the Green River killings in 1983. Ridgway was known for strangling his victims, but he often targeted runaways, sex workers, and other vulnerable women and girls. Notable members of the Green River team included Robert Keppel, who assisted in the Ted Bundy case, and FBI Special Agent John E. Douglas, the criminal profiler behind the Mindhunter book, which was subsequently turned into a Netflix show. The criminal profile created for the Strangler described him as an opportunist who attacked women who were in vulnerable positions, such as a quiet parking lot, isolated bus stop, or out during the night. Additionally, the Strangler was not believed to be a stalker. He would likely be a resident in Waipahu or Sand Island, or possibly worked there, and would drive a cargo van. He was also believed to be white or mixed race, between the ages of 30 and 40, and would have no criminal record. Further details were revealed to the media by the police chief Douglas Gibb, who stated, "He's an individual who may be experiencing girlfriend or marital problems, and the selection of victims is probably the result of opportunity or chance encounters." Following the creation of the task force, other implementations were made, including adding two-way radios to public bus services so that drivers could request aid or report strange sights. Despite this, the Strangler continued to attack and get away with his crimes. On March 26th, Louise Medeiros became the Strangler's next victim. The 25-year-old was described by the Honolulu Star-Bulletin as a young woman who had lived much of her life before she knew how to live it. She had reportedly left her family as a teenager, moving to Oahu to seek independence. She only returned home once in the span of 6 years, and during her time in Oahu, she had received welfare, had minor brushes with the law, and lived with beach people at Makaha. Louise had never married and had 4 children. She was 3 months pregnant with her 5th child when she vanished. Just days before she went missing, she had returned home briefly following the death of her mother. Her family described her as ambitious and determined to turn her life around. She no longer wanted to be a rebel. She was motivated to change. Her family told the press she was finally happy. Louise disappeared after leaving the airport, having returned to Oahu from her family home. She had planned to catch a bus back to her apartment, but never arrived. On April 2nd, a week after she vanished, the 25-year-old's body was discovered by road workers near Wakili Stream, 12 miles from where Denise's body was discovered 2 months earlier. Louise's hands had been tied with a parachute cord, and she was nude from the waist down. Because of decomposition, it could not be conclusively said whether she had been sexually assaulted. Investigators noticed that the first 3 victims of the Strangler had been dumped around the Honolulu International Airport, while Louise had passed through the area. This suggested to them that the airport was an important area to the perpetrator, so the police posted undercover female officers around the airport and around Ke'ehi Lagoon, but the Strangler never took the bait. The final victim of the Strangler was 36-year-old Linda Pesce, who was last seen on April 29th, leaving her apartment. When she failed to return home, her roommate became concerned. But this mild worry became full-blown alarm when Linda failed to attend work the following morning. After discovering that the 36-year-old's Toyota was unlocked and parked by the Nimitz H1 viaduct, the roommate immediately contacted the police. Linda was described much like Vicky. She was streetwise, opinionated, and a fighter. Loved ones also called her carefree, and she spent the 1970s hitchhiking across the US before winding up in Hawaii, where she worked as a dancer in a nightclub. Much like Louise, Linda left her rebellious streak behind after she gave birth to her daughter. Beginning their investigation, detectives quickly discovered that on the night of the disappearance, witnesses had seen Linda's Toyota with its hazard lights flashing. They reported that another vehicle had parked beside it as if to provide aid. The car was described as a cream-colored, American-made van with letters on its back windows, although it's unclear what those letters were. Witnesses described seeing a man of medium build in his late 30s or 40s. He was either white or mixed race, but despite having this information, authorities were not immediately able to locate this individual or the van. Then on May 3rd, 43-year-old Howard Andrew Gay contacted the police. He claimed that he had been told the location of the body by a psychic, telling investigators that it was at Sand Island, which is a small island located at the entrance to Honolulu Harbor. Gay took law enforcement to the spot where he was supposedly told Linda was buried, but no remains were uncovered. Still, investigators combed the tiny area and eventually did find Linda's body. She was lying off a dirt road, nude, her hands tied with a parachute cord. There was a cement block on her back, and she was partially hidden by dirt and debris. With the discovery made, detectives turned their attention to Gay, whose story they were highly suspicious of, considering the 43-year-old fit the physical description of the Strangler. Asking about the man, investigators discovered that he was obsessed with an employee of a local sailing club who was known to fit the same general description as most of the Strangler's victims. Reportedly, Gay would often stare at the young woman and offer her lifts, which she always rejected. He even became enraged when she declined his offer, but accepted a ride from a biker. Detectives also learned that he had physically assaulted another woman who had refused to enter his vehicle. 6 days after they met Gay, on May 9th, the police arrested him. Howard Gay was originally from Buffalo, New York. A military serviceman, he had been stationed at George Air Force Base in California until 1965, when he was honorably discharged. After leaving the Army, he worked a plethora of odd jobs, including delivery driver and telephone lineman, eventually landing a gig as a mechanic at an air freight carrier on Lagoon Driver. He drove a cream-colored van and had, at one point, been married, but divorced from his wife in 1983. The couple had 2 children together. He had never run into trouble with the law. Given his job, which had him working at the airport, he likely had access to parachute cord. He also fit the build and age of witness accounts from the night of Linda's disappearance, as well as the age of the criminal profile. Women who had been romantically involved with Gay, including his ex-wife, called him persuasive, charming, and a smooth talker. They also noted that he enjoyed bondage and liked to tie women's hands behind their backs while engaging in sex. His girlfriend at the time was interviewed by police and backed up these claims. She also stated that on the nights the Strangler's victims disappeared, she and Gay had fought, and he had stormed out of their home in a rage. With all this information at hand, detectives felt certain they had their man. Gay was interrogated for 10 hours, as well as given at least 1 polygraph test, but no evidence actually existed that directly linked him to the crimes. What investigators had was circumstantial. As a result, law enforcement let Gay go. Afterwards, he told the press, "The police have released me, that's all I know. They have plenty of good cause. They're doing their job." Gay's polygraph tests were inconclusive. Interestingly, police recovered a notepad in Linda's office which had Gay's name and phone number on it. He was believed to be a potential customer. Further evidence against Gay included that an eyewitness on the night of Linda's disappearance picked the 43-year-old out of a lineup, although she would later fail to testify against him, as she feared for her life after Gay saw her. Gay was monitored for years afterwards, and the police made a $25,000 reward available for information, but he was never linked to the crimes by forensic evidence and thus was never charged with the crimes of the Honolulu Strangler. After his release, the Strangler never struck again. In June of 1986, Gay made a trip to California to see his son graduate, but the young man was killed in a car accident around this time. Afterwards, Gay became a born-again Christian, and he eventually moved back to California permanently. He died on November 2nd, 2003, aged 60. Despite the lack of physical evidence, Honolulu investigators believe that Gay is their man. Many things about his life and physical appearance line up with that of the Strangler. Frustratingly, however, the cases of Vicky, Regina, Denise, Louise, and Linda remain unsolved. Their families found no closure nor any justice, and if Gay was truly the Strangler, then he was able to live out the rest of his life in peace, a luxury he did not afford his victims. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.